Hello, guys. Welcome to the 8th episode of Dev's Wall. Today, keeping up with the tradition, we have a really special guest. He is a software engineer with more than 9 years of experience. He is responsible, flexible, creative, fast learner, and adaptable. He is proficient in JavaScript and C# programming using SQL and NoSQL databases. He's interested in learning and creating new stuff. He studied computer and systems engineering in University of La Salle in León, Guanajuato, here in Mexico, and also has an MBA in the Universidad Latinoamericana in León, in the same city. So I'm really happy to have, and I want to welcome Homero Silva. How are you?
Hey, you're fine, and you? Very much. Very happy to be here.
Oh, I'm the happy here. Thanks so much for accepting. And as usual, as you may know, you are more than welcome to any other episode here.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the invitation. I really appreciate to spend some time chatting with you about one of the coolest languages that it's getting a lot of hype.
Okay, but first, wait on that. First, we're gonna go to that language that we all love a lot.
Sure.
But
sure.
First, we all want to know a little bit about yourself. How did you start on this on software engineering?
Well, I studied at computer systems engineering. So when I finished my degree back in the day, we used to develop desktop applications. I learned a lot of C#. That was like my first main language, C#. I used to do web forms and applications like with framework 3. And then we moved back to all of the web services and REST, and then I continued learning a bit more and more about C#. And then in one point in my career, I don't exactly remember when, but I was assigned with some tasks regarding frontend, and I had no idea on how to do frontend because I was using Razor views with .NET. So I was like a super full .NET guy. So for me, it was like super challenging. I was like, I don't like this language. I don't like that it's not type. I don't like anything about it. I don't like the hoisting. I don't like anything about JavaScript or CSS. I used to hate CSS because it was super confusing for me. But I remember that in my project, they were like, we don't care that you don't like it, you have to do it. So I had to learn AngularJS. That was the first. Well, I already had worked with jQuery. jQuery was like super outdated at the time. So I had to learn AngularJS. And that's where I learned to like a little bit more JavaScript. That was my first like true contact with a framework that had components and stuff like that. So that's pretty much a small gist. A very, very short summary, but to make the long story short, I started as a backend developer with C#, and I don't do C# anymore.
Oh, that's too sad. But it's cool. Now you're in the hype. I mean, you started like doing the classic Windows forms or web forms then.
Yeah.
Back in those days with Visual Studio, which I still think is the coolest IDE.
Definitely. As an IDE, it's awesome.
Yeah, that's Microsoft's strength in the IDEs. I don't know, a lot of people still use Visual Studio, the standard one, and obviously the Visual Studio Code. I call it the more hipster one. But yeah,
definitely.
It is cool. So nice. You started in the C# and you said some point in your career that you don't remember when you moved to the other side. We call it,
definitely.
I would call it the dark side, but it's not the dark side. It's come more to the front side because you are leaning more towards front-end development with JavaScript. But
yeah, I mean, I had a friend. Well, I was in a project, and I had he's not my friend. I had a work buddy who was on the front-end part. He was like, do you have an idea of how to start it? And I'm like, no, man, I have no idea how to do anything at all with the front end. So he was like, come with me, I'm going to show you. And little by little, he began to show me the basics of HTML, the basics of CSS, and then the basics of JavaScript. So little by little, I got to learn a little bit more and more and more. And I found more interesting, for me at least, it was more interesting to work on the front end part, where you can see the button, where you can see the actions and interactions. So for me, it was like an eye opener, because back in my time we didn't study that in school, so there was like no front end at all. I mean, everything was the most front end thing that I saw in college was PHP, but I didn't really like PHP at all. For me, it was like super detailed language, so I stick with C sharp. So little by little, I began learning on that, and then Angular 2 came out, but I didn't like Angular that much because you had to use TypeScript. Like there was no way to use Angular without TypeScript, and I was in a conflict with myself, because like I felt like I was programming C sharp, and I was programming another front ends. For me, it was like a super shocking deal to be writing like writing like all of the TypeScript code in the front end, and then going back to C sharp was like, it's almost the same syntax, but you have to use semicolons, and over there now, and you have to use the double quote, the colons, and then I have to use equal on the TypeScript. So for me, it was super hard, but I thought it was a good idea to have TypeScript because it gives you like more clarity on how to do things. But for me, it was super hard because I was just learning JavaScript, and I was like super happy. Like, you know what? This is a different language. It's super different. It has like a lot of possibilities. And then you switch to TypeScript, and like, this reminds me a lot of C sharp. But again, TypeScript was developed by Microsoft, so it makes sense that it's very similar to C sharp.
Yeah, it is true. For me, it was like interesting how a framework developed by Google, which is Angular. I know it started that the official language for that was TypeScript, right? A language by Microsoft. That was the interesting part for me at that time. I remember I don't do, to be honest, by the destiny. I don't know. I haven't done much front end. I'm more of those old guys that are more focused to the back end, a little bit full stack, but when the whole front end wave came, I kind of stick to the back end. So yeah, but I just saw how all the new frameworks emerge and how the front end language itself, well, I would say JavaScript and all its variations evolved and gained a lot of strength, right? So now,
definitely.
So now I would say let's go to the specific topic. I mean, we've been talking about that. Let's talk about my favorite language. I don't know if people watching this understand or they deal with sarcasm. Sometimes I use it. So, no, I'm gonna be honest. I'm not a huge fan, but I know it's JavaScript is like the main language these days, or it has been since maybe 2-3 years, or maybe more. I don't know. If you know, I would say if you know this language, 5 years,
like
or more or less.
More or less, it began. Yeah.
Well, it began, but the strength it has, because now if you know JavaScript, you can do basically everything, right? You can do backend, you can do front end, you can.
Yeah, you're correct. I'd say like 4 to 3 years, it has gained a lot of popularity. All of this popularity came along with Angular, AngularJS, Vue, and with React, also with Node. So
Node, and a lot of popularity, I would think, with Node, right? Because of the backend stuff. Because now you can do both things there with JavaScript. So what you are the expert in this language here. What can you tell us about it? There's tons of things.
I mean, I was on the same side as you. I didn't like JavaScript at all. I liked my code typed and compiled. I hated having runtime errors. For me, it didn't make any sense to, just type code and then hit save and you are done. And those cryptic errors that meant nothing. I was on that part as well. So pretty much JavaScript gained a lot of popularity because of the same reason. The same reason that .NET and what's the word? For example, .NET has the razor views, so it's pretty much the same. There was a bunch of people who wrote a lot of backend code but didn't want to learn front end, so Microsoft created the razor views for those guys, where you can use the dot csh dot csh
CSHTML, right?
HTML.
Yeah.
Yeah, those ones. So pretty much happened the same here in JavaScript. So there was like a bunch of front end developers who didn't want to learn any other language to write backend. So they decided to port JavaScript to the backend, and hence we have Node. But it's pretty much the same. So and again, a lot of people who were backend didn't want to learn JavaScript, so Microsoft created TypeScript. But that's the next topic. But returning to JavaScript, yes, that's one of the reasons why Node was developed, and one of the disadvantages. I mean, there are patches and there are ways to overlook it. But for example, one of the main things that Node has is that it only runs on one thread. You don't have any multi-threading with Node. You can use like a pool of events, which behaves similarly to having multi-threading, but it still runs on one thread. So again, you can use the event pool, but that's one of the disadvantages that you may have with Node. You can have a lot of events and you may lose track of all of the events that you have, but that's the reason why Node was built. So I think it's a great idea. I mean, it's not as stable as .NET, to be honest. I mean, there's nothing special like for example with .NET, when you can debug your code, you can go line by line and debug your code, have logs and whatsoever. For me, that's still one of the best things that Microsoft has, to be honest. But again, you can develop super fast things here with JavaScript. For example, when you want to do any algorithm challenges, for me, it's much more faster and much more easy to do algorithm challenges in LeetCode or any platform with JavaScript, because you don't have to care a lot on types. You can just create like super quick algorithms, and then you're done. And when you try to do those algorithms with C#, you have to create a class, and you have to specify the types of the class, or the properties, and then the types. So for me, it's more challenging. And for example, to do a simple thing like algorithms on any platform like LeetCode. I don't know if you have ever tried, but what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I've been. I actually have the HackerRank page open here. I sometimes practice. I've been practicing there for years. And sometimes I let it for many months without practicing, and then I remember, again, I need to start practicing again, and I'm go back and forth, and then I stop practicing and I forget everything that
all the things you learn.
all the things, and I need to start again, and it takes time, But yeah, in terms of language, I think for that sense, JavaScript is much more simple, I guess. I mean, to manipulate like the arrays and the stacks and the queues, it's almost the same thing, right? And to initialize, it could be like, it could lead to a smaller piece of code and simpler. I still, obviously, my preferred language, I still use C# because I feel more secure on that. But there was a time where I also used a lot of JavaScript. But in terms of algorithm, it's the same. I mean, the difficult part to resolve is the algorithm, not the language.
Yeah, the logic,
itself.
Not the syntax. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
But in that point, I agree with you. It could be much more simple using JavaScript.
Yeah,
Now that you're, sorry to interrupt, now that you're mastering Python, do you think Python will be, just a parenthesis, we'll keep with JavaScript, but do you think with Python will be even simpler as a language? That's a good question, I know.
Yeah, I know. The thing with Python, I think Python it's a much more dirty language than JavaScript. It's because for starters, for example, at least in JavaScript you have curly braces, at least, and in Python you have to use spaces to indent your code. So, and there are like some functions that are already built in that you can like iterate an array and reverse it in one line. And for me, those things are like super dirty. I mean, not dirty, but super hard to read, super messier. So yeah, I would say it's faster, but it's more dirtier and it's harder to understand. But it's so popular. But I mean, I'd stick with JavaScript.
No, I know. I would have some opinion, but I don't know much Python. I mean, I started a course in same HackerRank to learn Python, but honestly, I haven't done so far. So I wouldn't have a valid, or at least a strong opinion, because I'm not sure. I just know, I mean, by other people's opinions, that it was kind of well, it has been there for many years, Python, but it's
Yep.
kind of oriented more to maybe non-programmers, because I mean, but not to say people that do non-engineering stuff or not, because it's actually more focused to mathematicians or maybe
Yeah.
physicians, people
Yep.
of other core, but to do interesting interesting stuff or complex stuff as
Yeah,
well.
it was a language developed to create bash scripts and to automate stuff. And pretty much like JavaScript, somebody decided to, hey, this thing would be super cool to do statistical model, linear regressions, and a bunch of things. You can do a lot of data science. You can do neural links and natural language processing. I mean, you want to do data science, you can either go with Python or R, but Python has more libraries and more backed up libraries than R. They're very similar, but yeah, I don't know who decided and when this whole thing began and became a thing. Like, you know what, if you want to do the data science, Python is the way. I don't know when it started, but someone decided that language was the correct one, and it's okay. I mean, it's similar to JavaScript. It doesn't have it's not typed, and you can change a string into whatever you want. We have classes now in Python, but I don't know how it started to transform from a scripting language to the data science language. It's so strange. I don't know how it happened, but it's okay.
Okay, just it was a small parenthesis. We're still
No, yeah.
going back to JavaScript.
JavaScript.
How have you seen the evolution of the language, or what do you think about it regarding the people's opinions on how dirty it is, or how it has evolved, and how it's almost used for everything? And well, what else can you say on that?
It's pretty much as we said with Python. I mean, this language was developed just to modify the DOM, to do animations with the DOM, to show and hide stuff. So that was the main goal of the language. That was why it was so dirty, because it was created to just show, hide, or modify the DOM. Suddenly, someone decided hey, this language should go to the backend. Hey, we should do micro components. Hey, we can do micro frontends, and hey, you know what? We can do everything with JavaScript. And yes, it's possible. You can do anything with any language. But when you stray from the path that was meant to be, you're going to have issues. So that's when people decided to go that path. You know what? Let's do everything with JavaScript. They found a lot of issues. They found it was a super dirty language, and they tried to create transpilers such as CoffeeScript in order to give a little more order. It was cool for a while, CoffeeScript, but people still wanted to keep using JavaScript in a more natural, vanilla way. That's how it's called. And then they proposed adding classes to JavaScript, and they were a hit for 6 months. Nobody liked classes in JavaScript because it's pretty much very similar to C# or other languages, and it's not so friendly to have classes. I mean, in several projects that I have worked with, we haven't had the need to have classes in JavaScript as well. So, but again, the community, the language, it's trying to evolve itself. It's trying to be less and less dirtier. I mean, classes are great. I'm not a fan, but they are great because you can set properties, you have a constructor, you can inherit stuff. So it has been maturing a lot, and I think that we're at a point that you can use it everywhere that you want, but you have to be careful, because if not, you're going to eat all of the users' RAM. But nowadays, I think it's a super mature language. For example, you can run the Adobe Suite in your browser with JavaScript. I mean, there's a secret over there, but you can run it thanks to JavaScript.
Nice. I remember there are so many frameworks, right? There have been so many JavaScript frameworks since the jQuery times. Now with all the reactive programming, with Angular, React, and Vue, and all that stuff. But I remember once those days when I was trying to learn some JavaScript, and Also learned some different frameworks that were on those times, and I remember a page that say, okay, there's a cool library that's called Vanilla JS. You just need to do it and implement, put it on the top of your HTML, and basically it was an
You're
empty,
done.
it's an empty JavaScript file.
Yeah.
It's called Vanilla JS. It's empty, and okay, now you're coding in
You're
Vanilla
good.
JS.
Yeah, that's how it's currently called. But much of this maturity is because, for example, you can use now, for example, all of the double suite in the browser because we have this thing called WebAssembly.
Oh,
I don't know if
WebAssembly.
you have heard. Yeah, I mean, all of the image. I mean, you can add C code. I don't know how many languages you can add, but I am aware that you can add C code, for example. So let's say Adobe, all the transformations that Adobe has, for example, switching an image from color to black and white, you just import your C++ or C libraries in the WebAssembly file, and then with a single click, you can just invoke the function pretty much as just doing transform, and then there you go. You send the parameters and you get everything right away. So that's why it's getting more and more popularity. And I think that one of the big steps, if anybody wants to get into web development, would be at least learn the basics of WebAssembly, because almost all of the heavy duty or heavy tasks should be moved to WebAssembly in order to keep your application faster and more segregated. Because again, JavaScript is meant to alter the to do the manipulation, and not to change image color or any of those crazy things that you can do, but it's not meant to do that.
Nice. Yeah, I've actually, talking about WebAssembly, I started doing a personal project in Blazor with obviously with .NET and C#. I'm not quite sure because I selected the Blazor server, so I'm not quite sure if I am actually maybe I'm not even using WebAssembly because I understand, or maybe I'm using, but only small part, only on the client side. We're supposed to be using that because there's also Blazor client. But do you think with this WebAssembly, do you think it's gonna gain strength because it's kind of a totally different thing, right?
Yeah, it's super different. I mean, it will get a lot of hype, and it will be one of the next standards. There's also a language that already handles most of that, which is Rust. But again, Rust is another language. So if you want to be more and more up to date, and for the next big thing, you should definitely take a look into WebAssembly, just at least to understand what it is, how can I use it, when should I use it, and to see that there's an option. Because let's say you are working on a project that you want to transform images in the browser, then you can just look for a library that already does that, import it in your WebAssembly file, and you can get super fast results that a lot of people. So I think that at least it's important to know that it exists, that it is there, and to know how it works, and you're good. I mean, because yes, you said it's a different language. You can use C or Rust, but it's a different language again. So it's getting more and more complex. I think that programming itself is getting more and more complex. We are doing more crazy and more ridiculous stuff, so it's getting crazier, and it's hard to keep up.
yeah, I agree. But do you think with the WebAssembly, the JavaScript trend will decrease? I mean,
no, I don't think so, because, for example, we have React, which is one of the most popular frameworks. We have had Ionic for a lot of years, and you can create web applications and mobile applications with JavaScript. I mean, they are not as fast or reliable than a native one, but again, if you want to use like a single check-in, check-out application, and you already know JavaScript, you can just download React Native, learn. I have used it. You have to learn like very small differences, syntax-wise, but let's say you spend like a week or two learning the differences from React and React Native, and you can deploy an application in your cell phone in a month. A very simple one, but you can do that without learning anything new from JavaScript. So I don't think the hype will pass right now. But I don't know. I mean, maybe if somebody else comes with a different language than JavaScript, but Microsoft already tried that a long ago and they didn't succeed. So I think JavaScript is here to stay as long as we keep using computers and cell phones. Because now we have Meta from Facebook. So I don't know how to program on Meta, but that's another thing.
Yeah, I will agree with you on that. I mean, it's still. I mean, a lot of people know JavaScript and are learning that language. So yeah, I think it's here to stay. Even if we start using like WebAssembly or other things, the language itself will still be used, I guess.
We prevail.
Yeah, exactly. So, is there like a latest for JavaScript? I mean, going back to we switch a little bit to WebAssembly, but going back to
That's okay. It's very
JavaScript,
important.
do we have like a latest? I don't know how to call it. The ones that are ES6, like ECMAScript,
Version. Let's call it
like
version.
version. Is it like a latest stable version or official version for most browsers?
I think we have ES9.
Oh
Yeah,
my God,
we already have ES9, which is released in 2018 or 2019. I don't remember. But the good thing now is that finally Microsoft decided to deprecate or remove Internet Explorer, and now they make you use Edge browser, and Edge browser runs on Chromium. So every day that passes, it's easier to have the latest JavaScript engine in your computer. Thanks to that, because previously not previously, always the issue has been Internet Explorer, but finally they decided to kill it. So I think that it is easier and safer for us. Now the problem actually is Safari. Safari runs a different WebKit than Chrome, so sometimes you have to struggle with Safari, but fortunately, most of the people who use Macs don't use Safari. But I mean, if you're in your cell phone, if you are an Apple user, you have to use Safari, yes or yes. But I mean, you can check what you can see. There's like a lot of pages that tell you the compatibility. You should be aware of that. But yeah, I think nowadays it's easier to have the latest browser in your computer than previous ages.
Yeah, because now they're forcing you to have the latest one.
Mm-hmm.
In a way, the latest version. I mean, if you use Windows, you will have to switch to the latest version with Edge and everything. But
yeah,
I still think for the iPhone and Mac users, Safari will be like still a stone there, like a blocker, because it's pretty
still a
much
blocker.
in the iPhone. I mean, I have it, and I kind of forced to use Safari. I mean, I can have Chrome, but everything by default is with Safari, and so it is kind of it could be a blocker depending.
It is, because if you download Chrome for Safari, they force it. As far as I know, I don't know if that changed, but if you download Chrome, you have to use the same WebKit that Apple uses, so it really makes no difference at all. As far as I remember, I don't know if they changed that. But if you have a bug in Safari in your iPhone, it's likely that you will have the same bug on Chrome, because you have to use the same WebKit version. As far as I know, I don't know if that changed. So there's no way out in Safari.
Yeah, I agree. All right. So now we're still talking about script languages and JavaScript in a sense. Now let's talk about TypeScript. What can you say about it? First of all, what is TypeScript and what do we use it for?
TypeScript is a superset, or a JavaScript superset, which transpiles TypeScript into JavaScript code. It enables you to work in a much more cleaner way, because you have types now. You can declare variables and define the variable with a number. This one will be a string. This one, for example, in JavaScript, we don't have that. So you can specify this will be a string and this will remain a string. This is a Boolean and it will remain a Boolean. Or you can even specify this can be a Boolean or maybe a string. I mean, that's up to you. Why is this good? It's good because, for example, on JavaScript, I'm going to share my screen real quick.
Okay.
Okay, so one of the things that in JavaScript you have, it's this, for example, in this scenario in JavaScript, I mean, you tell me, would you be able to do this on C#? Of course not, right? I mean, I
Sorry,
don't
I
think that
think
you are able to. And
yeah, I
you
can
can
see.
see yeah,
I can
you
see the
cannot do
screen.
this.
Can you like, is it can we like maximize a little? Oh, there you go.
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
Okay, can
There
you
you
do
go.
this in JavaScript? Sorry, in C#, for example, can you run this bunch of code in C#?
No, well, I don't think so. It will be, you can use the bar, but you cannot sum a string and and a numeric thingy.
Yep. So, for example, you have this in JavaScript, and it will run. Do you have an idea? Do you have any idea of what this will print?
No idea. It will bring like a one, I don't know, like a 12 or something. I'm not sure,
It
to be
will it
honest.
will it will print at 12. It will print at 12. But
Oh,
the type of data that it will print will be
a string.
string. So yeah, everything when you do operations like this in JavaScript, it almost always ends up being a string. It doesn't make any sense actually. I mean, it doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, why would you want to sum a string with a number? I don't know, but sometimes it may happen. So TypeScript to the rescue. When you have TypeScript, you can specify, for example, stuff like this, which is string, number, and then this will bring type error, and you won't be able to compile your application because actually TypeScript compiles all of the JavaScript code into Java, all of the TypeScript code into JavaScript. So if you do this using TypeScript, you are safer. You are in a much more safe environment to don't have any issues like this, because if it may happen that you forget that A was a string or that B was a number, and you're expecting a number, right? Because in JavaScript, for example, in JavaScript, since this is a string, JavaScript previously, if you want to check equity, would be var is number. If I did this, for example, 12 equals 12, this returns true, because for JavaScript, it only checks the value. I mean, from it says it's 12 and it's okay. And then we have this is number strict. We have this 12, and you use the triple equal.
The triple equals, yeah.
And this is false. So let's say you have this, you have an if that does this. Let's say C equals 12. So let's say you forget that you declare A as a string, or you forgot that B was a number, and you're expecting a number. I mean, your code will never work because this in JavaScript returns a string. So TypeScript to the rescue. TypeScript will tell you, you know what? You cannot mix numbers and strings. I mean, you can, but I won't allow you. So if you can see, maybe I did something wrong, and then you can go back to your code and see, oh, this one is declared as a number, so my bad. Let's do it as a number, and that's it. So that's one of the good things that I like about TypeScript. I mean, that's one of the key value things that TypeScript brings to the table. That's a small scenario, but that's one of the things that for me are most valuable. The thing that I don't like, for example, is, let's say, since it's a superset and it's not from JavaScript, it's from Microsoft, you have to find the typings. So let's say I want to use TypeScript in my React application. I install TypeScript, and then I want to install a library that does, let's say, moment, for example, to handle dates. And if there's no typings for moment, then your application loses compatibility. So you have two options: either you declare types, or you declare types by yourself, or search in the web to see if anybody else had that issue and declared the typings in his own free time. So that's the disadvantage that TypeScript has, that once you go TypeScript, you cannot mix. I mean, you can use any, which is like, I don't care. But if you're using TypeScript, you should stick to to TypeScript rather than using any. So it's a cool language, but it's a cool library. I don't know. I think it's a language itself. It's a cool language, but it's hard to it's hard to master once if you come from a backend from a object no from a strictly typed language. For you will be easy to understand. If you come totally from Python or from JavaScript, it will be super hard to adapt because you are not used to have types. But for me, since I come from that part, for me it's cool. It's safe. It sometimes may slow you in order to find the typings, but it's better to know what you're expecting rather to have what, like I showed you, like a 12 string rather than a Treva number. So it has gained a lot of popularity. It's great. I mean, I'm super on board, but I think that it's not for everybody. I think that if you're a dynamic person, well, a dynamic language person, it would cause you a lot of noise to have particular types for everything. So yeah, I don't know. For example, you in C# have you used dynamic objects?
Just for samples, to be honest.
But do you like it? It's the same. It's the same. It's the same reaction when someone
use dynamic for learning what is a dynamic object, but yeah.
It's pretty much the same reaction when someone from JavaScript background comes to hear a Python. They see TypeScript and like, nah. It's pretty much the same reaction because you are forcing something into a language that was not meant to be that way. So, but again, even the creator of Node said that he wished that TypeScript existed when he created Node. So that's why he created Deno, which is pretty much Node backwards. Well, a mixture of letters, but Deno forces you to use TypeScript. And I think it's a great idea because when you're writing backend code, you have to know what you're expecting, what you're sending. So, you have to know all of the objects like in a correct way. So for me, having TypeScript in the backend, it's like a super great idea.
Nice. Yeah, basically the type safety, right? The type safety is the main point, I would say. These are called transpilers, right? Because it's not actually a compiler. This is basically like a top layer of the language that you will code in a, let's say, in a beautiful way or in a pretty way. If you like type safety, you will code that way and with a set of rules. And the actual language won't let you run if you have like type errors or something.
Exactly.
And it will just convert everything to JavaScript.
Yep. If you decide to see what it transpiles, you will be scared because it changes like everything. For example, with TypeScript, you can declare enums. I don't know if that's correct pronunciation, but you can declare enums. And I think that enums are my favorite part of TypeScript, having like enums when you can specify like addiction, like catalogs, for example. Let's say status, you can specify this would be active, inactive, or blacklist, whatsoever. And you can export that enum and you can check, for example, in any Windows application the status. Instead of typing if user.status equals string, you can import the enum and compare it with the exact enum. So for me, that's one of the greatest things that TypeScript brings to the table. However, JavaScript doesn't support enums. So in order for TypeScript to do it, it creates like a bunch of super complicated code that you shouldn't see and you don't want to see. But those little things make life easier. And it's like super charming to have those things. For me, honestly, that's one of the best things in order to have catalogs in place and not declaring constants, a file that is called constants, and then have like a status active constant status disabled. So for me, that's one of the best things that TypeScript brings to the table. So I mean, if you're a developer and you already are working on JavaScript, I would definitely recommend to begin taking a look at TypeScript because it's getting more and more popularity every day, more than WebAssembly.
Oh, nice. That's a nice point.
Now,
So TypeScript, what are you using it for? Are you using it in any framework, any front end?
Currently, I'm using React with TypeScript. It already, if you just create React application, you can specify that you want to with a command like dash dash TypeScript. I don't remember which one, but you can specify that you want to use TypeScript, and then you can use your React application with TypeScript, and it's been pretty fine because we are a team of like we work in a huge monorepo. We are like 8 people from 2 different teams, but we all share the front end layer. And you get a lot of type safety when, and let's say somebody else modifies the global state and that's a property. Then let's say, even myself, let's say I add something to the global state. If I am, since I am using TypeScript, I know that I won't miss, for example, any typo. I won't have any typo. For example, let's say my variable is called I have MNDA. Let's say I forget to use capital H or capital M, or I forget to use camel case and I use snake case. With TypeScript, I am sure and I'm certain that I will not have any typos with my variable. So that for me is great. It's pretty variable. I am not a very huge fan of TypeScript when using events. For example, when you have an on-click event and you want to find the React, the exact typing for, let's say, click on an anchor, click on a button, or click on a label, you're gonna have a hard time. So when it comes to events, I rather not use TypeScript, but for all of my states, all of my global states, I definitely encourage you to use TypeScript to have more control of everything that you are doing. Because let's say I have the variable and somebody may think, this will be a Boolean, but surprise, it's a string. So with TypeScript, everybody knows that it will be a string, not a Boolean.
Yeah, it's kind of more readable as well, right? I guess.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's super readable.
Maybe for me, because I come from that background with the C#, which is most backend languages. Well, at least C# and Java and those back on those days, they are type safe language.
It's very similar.
It's kind of similar in a way. It's readable as long as you follow the conventions using the correct variable names and all that stuff. At the end, it's really cool that we have all these tools for developers. I mean, at these days we started to have a lot of tools and new cool stuff for us developers. But at the end, I think no matter in what language you code or what tech stack you use, the patterns or the guidelines for general software engineering will persist, right? So the best practices will be same for if you use JavaScript, C# or Python, I guess. To use the correct names, follow a readable pattern, and obviously you have all the best practices, like don't have enormous functions or methods, and follow the camel case where you're gonna follow that one, follow the Pascal case, or follow the special variable names. I mean, the variable names, like the classic, they cannot be ABC or whatever, right? You need to be something that you're talking about, gives you context of what you're doing. Those kind of things, in general, in software engineering, I think they will help.
Yep, definitely. Yeah. I think that, as you say, any language that you're comfortable with, it's a good one. I mean, that's why Node was created. That's why Blazor views were created, because people felt safe using C# and they wanted to use in the front end. So if there's a possibility with Blazor, I mean, go ahead. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. As long as you, as you said, follow the correct pattern architecture, you should be fine. I mean, you can even use PHP nowadays, and if it's everything correctly, then fine. I mean, kudos to you.
Yeah, I agree. Well, this was really, really interesting, Homero. I really enjoyed this session. I really hope we have maybe later on with more details on we can continue with JavaScript. There's so much there, with some more TypeScript or anything else that you can share later on. If we hopefully we do another session and you can share
Yeah, yeah,
more of
yeah.
the cool stuff, because I know you're always involved in the new trends. So you will,
Yeah, you want?
I will be happy if later on I do some more episodes and you can come again and you will share the latest cool stuff that is there in the market. It will be good.
Yeah, if you want, in a different whole new topic, we can maybe show how to run a statistical model with R, a really basic one, but just to give
Oh,
you an example, that it's not as hard as someone would imagine. I mean, doing the math, it's hard, but using the tools that Python and R gives you, it's not as hard, and that's why it's also a trend. So you can check that later. I mean, I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy to collaborate and to be talking to you. So let's think again, and let's do that in a few weeks.
all right. Thanks. Thanks a lot for your time, Homero.
You too.
Really,
Thank you for
really
having
cool
me.
to
And
really cool to have you here. And anyone who watches this or watch it till here, thank you so much for your time. And see you next time. Bye bye.
bye. Thank you. Have a great day.